bound by the wild heart. Prologue. The jungle air was thick, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the distant whisper of the wind. Beneath the light of the full moon, shadows danced among the dense canopy, casting eerie silhouettes upon the underbrush. The only sound that could be heard was the pounding of the night and the ragged breaths of a lone figure fleeing through the undergrowth. Callum Wilder, in his wolf form, moved with a speed and agility that betrayed the desperation coursing through his veins. His muscles, slick with sweat and blood, burned as he pushed himself harder, faster. His dark fur, matted with the dirt of the jungle floor, glistened under the silver moonlight. But it wasn't enough. Behind him, the growls of the pursuing pack echoed through the trees, close, too close. The pack was relentless. The alpha, a hulking beast of pure rage, led them, his howls shaking the very air. Callum's senses, honed to perfection, told him that escape was impossible. There was nowhere left to run. His body was battered from the constant chase, his bones aching with each strained step. Every breath was a struggle, his chest heaving, lungs burning for air. He could feel his strength waning, the weight of his cursed existence pressing down on him. But he would not go down without a fight. His paws slammed against the earth, propelling him forward, the wind whipping through his fur. But it wasn't enough. The ground beneath his paws seemed to tremble as the pack closed in, tightening their circle. A sea of eyes glinted in the dark, watching him, waiting for the inevitable. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing louder than the last. There was no escape, only death. He reached the edge. The cliff, jagged and unforgiving, loomed before him. The steep drop below was hidden in darkness, as if the abyss itself was waiting to swallow him whole. The pack encircled him, their growls rising in triumph as they closed in, their claws scraping against the stone beneath them. Callum's mind raced. This was it. There would be no more running, no more fighting. He had no choice. He would fall. But there was something inside of him, an urge, a force, telling him to do it, to end this, to break free of the shackles of fate that had bound him for so long. And then it happened. The shift came suddenly, violently. His body, already worn and torn, contorted in pain as his wolf form began to fade, replaced by the human skin beneath. But it wasn't a graceful shift. It was frantic, desperate. He could feel his bones cracking, his flesh splitting. His mind screamed in agony, but he didn't stop. Not now. Not when freedom was within reach. With one final, desperate leap, he launched himself off the edge, his body twisting in the air. The wind rushed past him, carrying with it the sharp scent of the jungle below. And then silence. The ground rushed up to meet him, and everything went dark. Below, the pack's howls died out as they stood at the cliff's edge, staring into the abyss. Their leader snarled a low, guttural sound that vibrated through the still night air. The rest of the pack lingered, eyes scanning the darkness, waiting for a sign. But there was nothing. No body, no scent. A single silver necklace lay forgotten on the ground just beyond the edge, its delicate chain glimmering faintly in the moonlight. The pendant, engraved with an ancient symbol, shone against the wet earth. It was a symbol that none of them could ignore. What did it mean? What had Callum left behind? And why did it feel like his story was far from over? The camera lingered on the symbol, the cold steel of the necklace reflecting the light of the full moon. The answer was closer than they realized. But for now, it remained hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. As the wolves begin to disperse, their steps fading into the night, the camera focuses on the silver necklace, its engraved symbol glowing faintly against the wet earth. What does this symbol mean? What secrets does it hold? The mystery deepens, and the hunt is far from over. Chapter 1. The storm clouds gathered in the distance, dark and brooding, stretching across the horizon like a warning. Elara Vale stood by the large window of her upscale apartment, her gaze lost in the swirling mass of clouds above the city. The view from her apartment was breathtaking, with towering skyscrapers below and the bustling streets far in the distance. Yet, the beauty of the scene was lost on her now, drowned out by the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The walls of the apartment were filled with the sterile elegance of wealth, clean lines, modern furniture, and expensive decor. It was a life she had built, a life that seemed perfect from the outside. The perfect fiancé, Martin, the perfect career, the perfect future. Everything had seemed so right until now. Her fingers trailed across the glass of the window, feeling the coolness against her skin as the thunder rumbled in the distance, a forewarning of the tempest that was about to break. It mirrored the turmoil in her chest. She should have known. The signs had been there, subtle at first, a late-night business trip here, a few unanswered calls there. Martin had always been distant, but she had convinced herself it was just the pressure of work. They were planning their future, after all. A wedding, a family, everything she had ever dreamed of. Until that fateful afternoon, when she walked into their apartment unannounced. The image was still burned into her mind, Martin, wrapped in the arms of another woman, his lips on hers in their bed in their space. Her heart had stopped. Time had stopped. The betrayal had shattered her. Alara's breath hitched as she remembered the coldness in his eyes when he saw her standing there, unable to deny what she had seen. He hadn't apologized. He hadn't even tried to explain. Instead, he had blamed her for not being there enough, for being too focused on her career. It was her fault, and the weight of that accusation had crushed her, deeper than any of the physical wounds could have. Her fingers clenched into a fist against the window, as if she could physically hold back the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Anger, hurt, disbelief, they all churned together in her chest. But beneath it all was fear. Fear of what her life had become, of the future that now seemed so uncertain. "I can't stay here," she whispered to the empty room, her voice barely above a breath. Not like this. The decision had been made. She had already packed her things, slowly, methodically, trying to make sense of the chaos that had become her life. The apartment felt suffocating now, like it was closing in on her with each passing moment. The luxurious surroundings, the success, the perfect facade, it all seemed hollow. She moved from the window, the thunder growing louder, as though the storm outside was reflecting the one raging inside her. Her hand brushed against the neatly folded clothes in her suitcase, each one a piece of her old life that she was leaving behind. But there was more than just clothes in that suitcase. It was filled with pieces of her heart, broken and scattered. Martin's face flashed in her mind, his handsome features, his confident smile. He had been everything to her. He had promised her a future. He had promised her a family. And yet here she was, standing in the remnants of that dream, shattered and broken. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. A message from Martin. "We need to talk." She scoffed, her lips curling in disgust. Talk? What was there to say any more? She had nothing left to say to him. The damage was done, and no amount of words could fix it. With a heavy heart, she pressed the button to silence the phone and turned away. No, she was done talking. She had always been the person who tried to fix things, to make everything work. But now, she knew it was time to let go, to break free. Alara grabbed her passport, her credit cards, her phone, and slipped them into a small bag. There was a flight waiting for her, a flight to anywhere but here. She didn't care where she went. She needed to disappear, to escape. She needed to find peace, to be alone with her thoughts, to rediscover who she was outside of Martin, outside of this life that had begun to suffocate her. She moved through the apartment one last time, making sure she hadn't left anything behind. The apartment felt cold and foreign to her now. Every step felt like it was echoing the death of her former life, the life she had spent years building, only to have it crumble in an instant. The door shut behind her with a soft click, sealing off the life she had known. She made her way down to the elevator, the weight of the decision settling over her like a heavy cloak. The cool evening air greeted her as she stepped outside into the city streets. The storm was closing in, the winds picking up, but she didn't mind. She welcomed the storm, just as she welcomed the change that was about to come. She was done being the woman she had been. It was time to become something else. Elara stood on the dock, the boat gently swaying in the water, waiting for her to board. She hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the distant city skyline. What was she leaving behind? The future she had dreamed of? Or the person she was destined to become? She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle in her chest. With one final glance, she stepped onto the boat, the engine roaring to life as the boat pulled away from the shore. Her future was unknown. The storm in her heart mirrored the storm in the sky above. But one thing was certain. Elara was no longer running away from her life. She was running toward something new, something unknown, and the journey she was about to take would change everything. Chapter 2. The wind held around her as the boat cut through the churning sea. The storm had come out of nowhere. One moment, the sky had been clear, the water calm and inviting, and now, the world seemed to be collapsing in on itself. Thunder cracked in the distance, a deafening roar that shook her to the core. Elara clung to the edge of the boat, her knuckles white, her heart racing as the boat rocked violently beneath her. The horizon had vanished, swallowed by the darkness of the storm. The rain lashed at her face in sheets, cold and stinging, as if the ocean itself was angry at her intrusion. The boat dipped and swayed, its wooden frame groaning under the pressure. She could barely see, her vision blurred by the rain and the spray of the sea. The waves towered over her, threatening to swallow her whole with every passing moment. The boat jerked violently again, throwing Elara off balance, her body slamming into the side. She gasped for breath, the salty air choking her, her heart pounding in her ears. She had made the choice. She had left everything behind. But in that moment, as the storm raged around her, she felt more lost than she ever had before. The fear gripped her chest, suffocating her. What if she had made a mistake? What if she was never meant to escape, never meant to find peace? The boat lurched again, and Elara was thrown forward, her body crashing into the cold water with a sickening splash. The world tilted, spinning around her as she was pulled beneath the surface. Her limbs flailed, trying to grasp at something, anything, but the force of the water was too much. Her lungs screamed for air, but all she could taste was salt. The water seemed to close in around her, dark and endless, swallowing her whole. She tried to fight it, but the weight of the water was too heavy, dragging her down into the depths. She gasped, her lungs burning, but the darkness took her, pulling her deeper, farther away from the world she had known. And then everything went black. How long had it been? Seconds? Minutes? Or had it been hours? Elara wasn't sure. The next thing she knew, her eyes fluttered open. Her body was heavy, her limbs sluggish as if weighed down by the ocean itself. Her head throbbed, and her skin burned with the chill of the storm that had passed. She groaned softly, pushing herself up, but her vision was blurry, disoriented. She felt the gritty texture of sand beneath her fingers, the cold seeping into her skin. For a moment, she just lay there, her heart pounding as she struggled to make sense of her surroundings. The storm, the boat, the water, and then nothing. Her mind struggled to piece together the fragments of the events that had just transpired, but it all felt like a hazy dream, distant and unreal. She could hear the rhythmic crash of waves against the shore, but the rest of the world was eerily silent. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her skin, and her body ached from the violent impact with the water. She pushed herself up, wiping the salt water from her face, her hands trembling as she sat on the beach. Her breathing was shallow, her chest tight with the remnants of panic. Her eyes scanned the shoreline, but the land was foreign. She had no idea where she was. It wasn't the island she had planned to reach. The landscape before her was wild, untamed, Dense jungle surrounded the beach, the trees leaning precariously over the sand, their thick branches swaying in the breeze. The air was thick with humidity, heavy with the scent of salt water, and something else. Something deeper, wilder. Suddenly, a shadow shifted at the edge of her vision. Her pulse spiked, her instincts telling her that something or someone was near. She whipped her head to the side, eyes searching the darkening shore. There, standing at the edge of the jungle, a figure emerged from the trees. The silhouette was tall, broad-shouldered, and menacing. His posture relaxed yet predatory. He stepped forward, the soft crunch of sand underfoot the only sound breaking the eerie silence. Elara's heart skipped in her chest. She couldn't make out his features in the dim light, but she could feel the weight of his presence, like an unseen force pressing in on her. Her mind raced. Who was this? Had someone found her? Was she safe? Or had the storm, the crash, and everything that had led her here all been part of something darker? Something she hadn't understood? The man took another step toward her, and Elara's instincts screamed at her to run, to get away. But her body refused to obey. She was too weak, too disoriented from the crash. Her throat was dry, and her body ached with exhaustion. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, gravelly, a sound that seemed to rumble deep within him. There was something commanding in the way he spoke, but also something strangely calm, as if he had been through this before. Rescue, survival, chaos. Elara's breath hitched in her throat. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, his presence towering over her as he approached. The air around him felt charged, almost electric, as though there was something unnatural about him, something that sent a shiver down her spine. The faintest glint of moonlight caught his eyes as he stepped closer, and Elara froze. Those eyes, they were piercing, almost glowing, a strange silver that seemed to reflect the night sky itself. They were too intense, too foreign. She couldn't tear her gaze away. There was something unsettling about them, something that stirred a deep, primal fear inside her. Elara's voice cracked, hoarse from the salt water she had swallowed. She coughed, the sound sharp and jagged. "Where am I? What happened?" The man didn't answer immediately. His gaze lingered on her for a moment, assessing her, his eyes narrowing slightly. There was a flicker of something dangerous, like the calm before a storm. Then he spoke again, his voice smooth and measured, but with a sharp edge beneath it. "You're not supposed to be here," he said quietly, his tone low but steady. A chill ran down Elara's spine, her pulse quickening as his words settled in her mind. Not supposed to be here. What did that mean? Was he part of the island? Part of whatever force had brought her here? She swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Who are you?" The man hesitated, just for a moment, before stepping closer, his shadow falling over her like a dark cloak. The air around him seemed to shift, and Elara's heart raced in her chest. He leaned in slightly, and for the briefest second his lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I'm Callum Wilder," he said, his voice like a blade, sharp and cutting. "And you're in my world now." Elara's breath caught in her throat. Callum Wilder. The name sent a ripple of unease through her. Who was this man? Why did she feel like she was standing on the edge of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined? And as the darkness of the jungle loomed behind him, she couldn't help but wonder, had the storm brought her to this place for a reason? Or was it merely the beginning of a nightmare she was about to face? Chapter 3. The days on the island blurred into one another. The storm that had brought Elara here seemed to have washed away not only the world she once knew, but any sense of time as well. Every moment was filled with the dense, almost suffocating sounds of the jungle, the rustle of leaves, the calls of strange creatures hidden in the underbrush, and the occasional snap of a branch as something large moved through the trees. Callum had not left her completely alone. His presence was constant, but it was a presence that felt like it was always just beyond her grasp, as if he were a shadow slipping in and out of view. During the day, he taught her how to survive, how to gather food from the jungle, how to find fresh water from hidden springs deep within the foliage. His knowledge of the island was vast, and at times his hands were gentle, showing her the ways of the land with a patient, almost tender touch. But there was something about him that unsettled her. His eyes, those haunting, otherworldly eyes, were always watching, calculating, as if he were constantly measuring her, weighing something unseen in the balance. His behavior became more erratic with each passing day. Sometimes he would disappear into the jungle at night without a word, slipping away as silently as a shadow. Alara had never felt more alone, and yet she was never truly alone. Callum was always there, just out of reach, lurking in the corners of her mind. His absence at night filled the air with a tension she couldn't quite place. What was he hiding? Why did he leave her behind when the night descended, leaving her in the eerie silence of the jungle with only the sounds of unseen creatures for company? The questions piled up in her mind, and with each unanswered one, a knot of unease tightened in her chest. She tried to push them away, to focus on the present, on survival. But her thoughts kept circling back to Callum, his strange mannerisms, the way he seemed to be forever on guard, the way his gaze would linger on her just a little too long before he would disappear into the night, as if something inside him was pulling him away. There were moments when she caught him staring at her, those intense, silver eyes narrowing in a way that made her feel like he could see right through her. She had tried to ignore the feeling, to convince herself it was nothing more than her growing paranoia, but the nagging thought refused to leave her. Callum was a mystery she couldn't quite solve. It was late one evening when Alara's curiosity reached its breaking point. The jungle was alive with the sounds of the night, chirping insects, the distant calls of wild animals, and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the jungle floor. Callum had disappeared again, as he always did when the night fell. His absence felt like a weight pressing on her chest, and for the first time, Alara decided she would follow him. She waited until the last trace of light had faded from the sky, her eyes trained on the dark shape of the jungle ahead. Callum had made no attempt to hide his departure this time. He had simply turned and walked into the trees, disappearing into the thick shadows without a word. Alara moved silently behind him, careful not to make a sound as her bare feet pressed into the soft earth. Her heart raced in her chest, her breath shallow as she pushed deeper into the jungle, following the faint trail left by his movements. The trees above her loomed like silent sentinels, their thick branches weaving together, forming a canopy that blocked out much of the moonlight. The air was thick with humidity, the smell of damp earth and rotting leaves clinging to her skin. She kept her distance, moving cautiously through the underbrush, her senses alert. Every now and then, she would catch a glimpse of him, a flash of dark movement between the trees, the rustle of leaves, but he was always just out of reach. The silence between them was suffocating. Alara's mind raced with questions. Where was he going? Why did he feel the need to leave her behind? And what was he hiding? She was so focused on the path ahead that she didn't notice the sudden stillness around her. The jungle had gone quiet, unnervingly so. The air felt thick, heavy, as if even the creatures of the night had stopped breathing. The silence pressed in on her from all sides, making her skin prickle with unease. Something was wrong. Then she saw him. Callum stood at the edge of a small clearing, his back to her. He was perfectly still, his posture rigid as he gazed out into the darkness. For a moment, Alara thought he might have sensed her presence, that he had stopped because he knew she was there. But then something strange happened. His body trembled, just slightly but enough to make Alara pause. She held her breath, her heart thundering in her chest as she watched him. The transformation started slowly at first. Callum's posture shifted, his shoulders rounding as if something inside him was struggling to break free. His muscles rippled under his skin, and Alara's eyes widened in shock as his frame seemed to grow larger. The air around him crackled with energy, an unnatural force that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The moonlight flickered between the trees, casting strange shadows over the clearing as Callum's body contorted in ways that defied human nature. His face elongated, his eyes flashing with an intensity that made Ilara's breath catch in her throat. She took a step back, her heart racing with fear. And then, with a final, bone-shaking convulsion, he was no longer a man. Before her stood a massive black wolf, its fur glistening under the pale light of the moon. Its eyes, those haunting, silver eyes, were locked onto hers, and for the briefest moment, Ilara could see something human in them, something familiar. But it was fleeting, gone in an instant. The wolf growled, low and menacing, the sound vibrating through the air. Ilara stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She was frozen, unable to move, her mind reeling with disbelief. The man she had been living with, the man who had shown her kindness and taught her how to survive, was not human. He was a werewolf. Her pulse surged with terror. She had been right to question him. She had been right to feel the unease that had plagued her every time he disappeared into the jungle at night. But this was something she couldn't have anticipated. What was he hiding? Why had he kept this from her? The wolf growled again, taking a slow step toward her, its massive form dwarfing her small figure. Its eyes glowed with a strange, almost predatory light, and Ilara's breath caught in her throat. This was no accident. She had stumbled onto something far darker, far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Ilara's legs trembled beneath her as she backed away, her mind racing with 1,000 questions she couldn't answer. But as she turned to flee, she heard a voice. "Don't run, Ilara. I won't hurt you." But could she trust him? Could she trust a creature who was no longer human? Chapter 4. The jungle felt different that night. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken words, heavy as the humid mist that clung to her skin. The moon, pale and distant, barely managed to pierce through the tangled canopy above them, casting long, jagged shadows across the earth. Ilara's heartbeat pounded in her chest as she stood in the clearing, facing Callum, the massive black wolf, now a man again. Yet the sight of him in his human form seemed no less dangerous than when he had towered over her as a creature of night. He hadn't said much after his transformation, but now the silence between them hung like a storm waiting to break. His eyes, those silver eyes, were as unreadable as ever, but she could see the flicker of something else there, something raw, something almost afraid. "Callum," she whispered, her voice shaking despite herself. "What are you?" He didn't move at first, as though weighing the answer. His posture was tense, his jaw clenched, and his eyes never left hers. For a long moment he said nothing, and Ilara could feel the tension build, a gnawing need to understand battling against the growing fear inside her. Her hands were trembling at her sides. She didn't know if she was afraid of him, or of what he might say next. Finally, Callum spoke, his voice low, gravelly. "I'm a werewolf." The words hung in the air, and for a moment Ilara could barely breathe. She had known it, hadn't she? The signs had been there all along. The strange, unpredictable behavior, the way he always seemed to be on the edge of control, the way he vanished at night, as though the moon called to him. But hearing him say it out loud was different. It made it real. A shudder rippled through her, and she took a step back, unable to stop herself. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked, the hurt pouring out with the question. "Why didn't you?" "I couldn't," Callum cut in, his voice urgent, but still strained. "You wouldn't have understood. You'd have run, just like everyone else." Everyone else. Ilara scoffed, her anger rising. "What does that mean? You're on the run? You think I would have run just because you're a—" She paused, the word feeling strange in her mouth. "A werewolf." Callum's gaze flickered away, and for the first time since they'd met, Ilara saw something like regret in his eyes. It made her heart ache, but she swallowed it down, her confusion and frustration building. "Why wouldn't you trust me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but the hurt was clear. He shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at her. "It's not about trust, Alara. It's complicated. There are things I can't explain right now. Things I can't tell you. But believe me when I say I didn't want to hide this from you. I wanted." "You wanted what?" Alara's voice raised in frustration, her hands fisted at her sides. "You wanted me to be okay with this? With you being a monster." The word left her mouth before she could stop it, and it stung. She instantly regretted it, but the anger, the betrayal, burned too hot to contain. Callum's eyes flashed with something darker, his jaw tightening. His entire posture shifted, as if he were about to snap. But then, just as quickly he controlled it, his body stiffening like a stone wall. "You don't understand, Alara," he said softly, but there was a weight to his words that made her feel as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly become unstable. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose it. But I've been living with it for years, fleeing, hiding, trying to survive. You wouldn't have understood. You couldn't have understood." "You're right," Alara shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "I don't understand. I don't understand any of this. But what I do understand is that you've been lying to me this whole time." Callum's face tightened, but his voice was softer now, almost pleading. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." Her anger flared again, hot and sharp. "That's the same as lying, Callum." Silence fell between them, a chasm wide and deep, and Alara could feel the distance stretching between them like an insurmountable wall. She wanted to scream, to throw something at him, to make him feel the hurt that she was drowning in. But there was something else there, too. Beneath the anger, beneath the betrayal, was a strange, burning attraction that she couldn't seem to push away, no matter how much she tried. It was that thing she had been trying to ignore, the way her heart had started racing whenever he was near, the way her body reacted to his presence, the pull she couldn't explain. She opened her mouth to say something else, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned and walked toward the edge of the clearing, trying to distance herself from him, trying to breathe. And that's when it happened. A growl, low, guttural, echoed through the jungle. Alara froze, every muscle in her body locking into place as the growl reverberated through the night air. Her eyes shot to Callum, who was already standing tall, his body rigid, his eyes wide with alarm. "It's them," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "Who?" Alara asked, her voice trembling. "The pack," Callum answered, his voice barely audible. "My pack. They found us." Fear surged through Alara's veins, flooding her with adrenaline. Her stomach twisted in knots. "What do we do?" Callum's eyes flashed with something dangerous, something she hadn't seen in him before. "Run," he said, his voice sharp and urgent. "We need to get to the jungle now." But it was already too late. From the shadows, the sound of running feet filled the air, too many to count. The pack was closing in. Callum's gaze flicked around the clearing, assessing the situation, and then he turned to Alara, his voice low and commanding. "Stay close to me. Don't stray. No matter what happens, stay with me. Do you understand?" Alara nodded, her pulse racing as the growls and snarls grew louder, closer. The air around them seemed to thrum with tension, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Her eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement in the trees, her body bracing for the chaos that was about to descend upon them. "Stay behind me," Callum growled, his face hardening with determination. His form began to shift again, his bones snapping, elongating, for sprouting along his back as his transformation began anew. Alara stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. The jungle was no longer a place of strange beauty and isolation. It had become a trap, a death sentence. A loud snap of a branch in the distance made her freeze, And then, all at once, the world erupted into chaos. The first of Callum's former pack burst into the clearing, a massive, snarling beast with glowing eyes. The others were close behind. They had found them, and there would be no escape now. Chapter 5. The jungle at night had always been an enigma to Alara, beautiful in its mystery, dark and daunting in its vastness. But tonight it was something else entirely. The air was thick with the scent of danger, the moonlight barely able to cut through the dense canopy, and the very earth beneath her feet seemed to tremble with the promise of violence. Callum, the man, or was he a beast she had come to trust, was suddenly a stranger. The moment the pack had closed in, the change in him had been palpable. He stood at her side, body taut, his silver eyes flashing with a fear that mirrored her own. Alara's breath hitched, her heart pounding in her chest, echoing in the silence of the night. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She could only watch as the first of Callum's pack emerged from the shadows. Huge, snarling, their bodies rippling with muscle and fur, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Callum!" A voice growled from the darkness, rough and menacing. "You've been a coward long enough. It's time to return to the fold." Callum's jaw clenched, and Alara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his muscles coiled as though preparing for battle. She had never seen him like this before. Not this raw, this wild. He had always been in control, always the one to protect her, but now she could feel the struggle in him. The instinct to protect, to fight, was at odds with the fear of what his pack might do to him, to her. "They won't stop until you're dead," Alara whispered, her voice barely audible, but the fear in it was clear. Callum's gaze flicked to her, and for a moment their eyes locked. The world around them seemed to blur as everything else faded into the background. In that fleeting instant, Alara felt something shift between them, a moment of understanding, of connection, one that she couldn't quite explain. "You need to run, Alara," he said, his voice low, almost guttural, as he took a step toward her, blocking her from view. "Get out of here. Now." Her pulse throbbed in her throat, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from him. "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly, her feet planted on the ground, rooted in place by the raw emotion surging through her veins. "I'm not running while you fight alone." He didn't respond, but the frustration in his gaze was palpable. With a heavy exhale, he turned back toward the pack, who had now surrounded them. "Do it the easy way, Callum," one of them snarled, stepping closer, its form shifting in the shadows until Alara could make out the sharp gleam of its teeth. "Come back. There's no need for bloodshed." Callum's lips curled into a snarl, his body shifting. His bones cracked as they began to elongate, his skin pulled tight over the rippling muscles beneath. Within seconds, the man she had known was no more. In his place stood a massive black wolf, his fur gleaming in the faint light, his body enormous and powerful. Alara's breath caught in her throat. She had seen him shift before, but this was different. There was nothing human left in him now, nothing but the fierce, predatory nature of the wolf. Her heart hammered in her chest as the animal in him took over completely. "Callum," she whispered, the name a prayer on her lips. But there was no time for hesitation. The pack moved, and with a flash of motion they pounced. Callum, in his wolf form, leaped into the fray, his massive body colliding with the first of the pack with a bone-rattling thud. Teeth flashed in the moonlight, claws swiped through the air, and the sounds of growls and snarls filled the jungle, a terrifying symphony of chaos. Alara's legs trembled, but she stood her ground. There was no running, no way to escape the terrifying sight before her. Her eyes followed the battle as Callum fought fiercely, slamming his powerful body into the others with a force that shook the ground beneath her. His movements were swift, graceful despite his size, and each strike seemed to land with deadly accuracy. Yet, despite his strength, Alara could see the numbers closing in on him, their attacks relentless. They were too many, and even Callum's immense power couldn't stop them all. One of the wolves lunged, sinking its teeth into Callum's flank, and the black wolf let out a ferocious howl of pain, but he shook the attacker off with a violent snap of his head. His movements were slower now, his breath ragged as the pack pressed in from every side. It was becoming clear he couldn't hold them off for much longer. "Callum!" Elara screamed, her voice breaking through the roars of battle, but her cry was lost in the chaos. The pack had encircled him, and she could see the desperation in his eyes as he fought to protect himself and her. The blood from his wounds stained the earth beneath them, and every time he threw himself into the fray, another wolf took its place. And then, just as quickly as it began, the fight seemed to halt. The pack pulled back, allowing Callum a brief moment of respite as he stood, bloodied, battered, but defiant. His body was heaving, but his eyes locked onto hers for just a moment, his gaze filled with something she couldn't name, something dark, something distant. "Elara!" he said through gritted teeth, his voice low and dangerous. "They'll kill you if you don't leave. I can't protect you if I'm distracted. You have to." But before he could finish, a low growl erupted from the shadows. A massive wolf, larger than the others, stepped forward. Its fur was a dark silver, almost ethereal in the moonlight, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. It was the leader. Elara could feel the power emanating from it, like a storm about to break. This was no ordinary pack. This was something darker, something far more dangerous than anything Callum had let on. "Return with us, Callum," the alpha growled, his voice a rasp that sent chills down Elara's spine, "or we will take you by force. Your pack has no use for a coward." Callum snarled, his body tense with the effort of keeping his control. "I will not return. Not to you. Not to any of you." The alpha's lips curled in a snarl, his eyes narrowing. "You are making a mistake, but we are done with words. Come with us, or face the consequences." The tension between them was unbearable, the air thick with a threat that seemed to hang like a storm cloud waiting to burst. And then, just as Elara thought they would charge again, something unexpected happened. A sound, deep, resonating, and far too loud to ignore, echoed through the jungle. It came from the direction of the sea, far off in the distance. A ship's horn, a sharp, haunting sound that cut through the night like a lifeline. The pack froze. The alpha's eyes flickered toward the horizon, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Callum's expression shifted, his eyes flicking toward Elara. There was no fear in his gaze, only something darker, something resigned. "They're coming," he muttered, his voice filled with something close to despair. Elara's heart thudded in her chest as she realized the gravity of what was happening. Callum's pack had been hunting him, and now they were about to find out just how far Callum would go to protect her. But would help arrive in time? The pack's growls grew louder once more, and Elara could feel the weight of their presence closing in around her. Callum, weakened from the fight, was no match for the leader now. And the ship, rescue, or more danger. Time was running out. Would the pack attack before the ship arrived? Or was there hope yet for their escape? Chapter 6. The ocean stretched out before her, endless and dark, the churning waves crashing against the shore like a violent symphony. Elara stood there, watching it, her body stiff with exhaustion, her mind swirling with confusion. The ship had come just in time. Its horn had been a beacon in the night, cutting through the jungle's oppressive silence, offering her a chance at survival. A chance she had taken against all odds. She had been rescued, taken from the jungle, from the bloodshed, from the pack that had hunted them both. The ship had pulled her aboard with no questions, no hesitation, their eyes seeing only a pregnant woman lost in the wilds. It hadn't been the rescue she had hoped for, though. It hadn't been salvation, but a prison of another kind. A prison she could never have imagined. The crew had been kind enough, but there had been no warmth in their eyes. No compassion for the soul who had been torn from her lover, from the man who had fought and bled to protect her. She had watched them look at her with pity, their eyes scanning her growing belly with something close to judgment. They didn't know her story. They didn't understand. She could barely understand it herself. But the worst part, the hardest part, was that she had lied. She had been forced to lie. "Where is the man who was with you?" the captain had asked, his eyes narrowing as he searched her face. He had been kind, yes, but the suspicion in his gaze had been clear. They had pulled her from the jungle, but they hadn't pulled her from the truth she had buried deep inside. "I don't know," she had said, her voice trembling. He left? He didn't want to be found. The lie had tasted like ash in her mouth, and yet it had been the only thing she could offer. To tell them the truth would have meant certain death for Callum, and she wouldn't do that to him. Not after everything. But as the ship sailed farther away from the island, Alara's heart felt like it was sinking, the weight of her actions pulling her under. She had betrayed him. She had betrayed everything they had fought for. The lies she had told on that ship felt like chains wrapping tighter and tighter around her chest. She had lost him, and yet, even now, in the safety of the ship's hull, she could still feel his presence. His touch, his kiss, the heat of his body against hers. These things haunted her in the quiet moments when no one was looking. And worse still was the emptiness that had begun to grow inside her, a gnawing void where his love had once been. Her thoughts swirled in a whirlpool of grief and guilt as the ship sailed on, taking her farther from the island and farther from him. She clutched her arms around her middle, feeling the life growing within her, the silent reminder of everything she had lost. The future she was supposed to have, was it still possible? Or had she doomed them both by running? As night fell and the cold wind of the open sea whipped across her face, Alara stood alone at the edge of the deck, gazing out at the dark horizon. The waves crashed below, and above, the sky was thick with clouds, hiding the moon and stars, as if the world itself was in mourning. A single tear slid down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly, not allowing herself to fall apart. Not yet. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together everything that had happened, trying to find a thread of hope in the darkness. She had left the jungle, left the man she had come to love, left him to face his pack, his enemies, alone. Would he survive? Would she ever see him again? But the question that tormented her the most was the one she couldn't answer. What was she going to do now? What was left for her in this new life without him by her side? The ship creaked in the wind, its sail snapping, but Alara could no longer focus on the sound. Her thoughts returned to him, Callum. His silver eyes, the way he had looked at her before the fight began. There was something in them, something she hadn't fully understood at the time. Desperation? Hope? But above all, a fear that had seeped into his very soul. She had seen it, she had felt it, and now she was here, alone. The ship was taking her to civilization, to safety, but it was a safety that felt hollow. What had happened to Callum? Was he truly lost to her? Her heart ached at the thought. She had promised herself she would be strong, that she would protect her child. But how could she do that when the one person who had made her feel safe, who had protected her with every ounce of his being, was now a shadow in the distance? She turned from the railing, walking back to her quarters with slow, heavy steps. The ship rocked gently in the sea, but it did little to soothe the tightness in her chest. Her room was small and sparse, just a cot and a small window looking out onto the waves. She had barely slept since the rescue, haunted by the memories of the jungle, of Callum's battle, and the loss she had felt in her bones. She sat on the bed, the chill of the ship creeping into her bones, though it was more the chill of loneliness than the cold of the sea. There was nothing here for her, no future, no Callum, and yet, as she lay there, staring out at the dark ocean, she couldn't escape the truth that had been growing in her heart. She didn't belong here, not in the safety of this ship, not in this life they had offered her. Her heart was still bound to him, Callum. She had to find him. She had to make sure he was okay. She sat up suddenly, her breath catching as she heard something distant but distinct. The door to her cabin creaked open with a quiet whisper. Her heart stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was Callum, alive, standing before her. His wolf's eyes glowed with an intensity she had never seen before, and in them she could see everything she had been running from: fear, desperation, and, more than anything, a need. She froze, unable to speak, unable to move. The man she thought she had lost, he was standing there, alive, and looking at her with a hunger that she couldn't understand. Her mouth opened, but the words caught in her throat. "Callum!" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her heart thundered in her chest, a mixture of disbelief, relief, and something else she couldn't name. "You're alive! How?" But before she could say more, before she could process the shock of seeing him, Callum stepped forward, his body tense, his eyes burning with urgency. "Ilara, we don't have much time," he said, his voice low and strained. "They're coming for us. You have to leave now." Ilara's heart raced, her emotions tumbling in a whirlpool of confusion and fear. What was happening? Why was he here? What did he mean they were coming for them? Could she trust him after everything that had happened? The door was closing, but this time Ilara had to choose: fight or flee. Chapter 7. The room felt suffocating in its silence, as if the very walls were closing in on her. Ilara sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling in her lap, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Callum was here, standing in the doorway of her apartment, his presence filling the space with an energy so intense it made her skin prickle. She hadn't imagined this moment, not like this. Her mind still reeled from the shock of seeing him alive, the desperation in his eyes, and the words that tumbled from his lips like a flood she couldn't dam. The urgency in his voice hadn't faded, not even now, as they stood facing each other across the small room. "Ilara!" Callum's voice broke the silence, rough and laden with emotion. "I know this is hard to understand, but you need to listen to me. You're in danger." She swallowed hard, her throat dry, her pulse pounding in her ears. He had been standing there for what felt like an eternity, but neither of them had said anything more. Not yet. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She could barely breathe, let alone formulate a question that would make sense. How was this possible? How had he found her? More importantly, how could he be standing here in front of her? After everything that had happened? A flood of memories came rushing back. The jungle, the fight, the pack closing in, the lies she had told to protect him. Her heart twisted painfully in her chest as the weight of it all settled over her like a heavy cloak. She had left him. She had betrayed him. And now he was here, alive, demanding answers from her in the way he always did. But how could she trust him? How could she trust anything he said after all the secrets, all the lies, all the things he had hidden from her? "Ilara," he said again, his voice softer now, but no less urgent. "Please, I need you to understand. I never wanted you to be involved in this. But the pack, my pack, they've been hunting me for months. They're coming for you, too." She stood abruptly, her heart racing, the anger flaring up inside her like a flame that threatened to consume everything. "You've been lying to me, Callum," she snapped, her voice trembling with the force of her words. "All this time, you've been hiding things from me. Why didn't you tell me the truth?" He winced, as if her words had struck him harder than anything physical ever could. His eyes flickered with guilt, but also with something else, something deeper, darker. "I couldn't," he said, his voice strained. "I wanted to, Ilara, but I couldn't. Not until I knew you were safe." She shook her head, the frustration inside her bubbling to the surface. "Safe? You think I'm safe now?" Her voice cracked, and she felt a sudden rush of heat on her face, tears she hadn't expected. "I'm alone. I'm trapped in a city with a baby I don't know how to protect. And now you come back with all these promises and half-truths? What am I supposed to believe?" Callum took a step toward her, his gaze pleading, his jaw clenched tight. "You need to trust me, Ilara. You need to trust that everything I've done, everything I've kept from you, it was to protect you. The pack doesn't just want me. They want you. They want the child you carry." Alara's stomach churned, the words settling in like ice in her veins. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The child," he said, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't quite read. "There's a prophecy. The child you carry is part of it, and it's the key to everything." A chill ran through her. Prophecy. The word alone made her skin crawl. She had never believed in such things, not in the logical, practical life she had built for herself. But now everything had changed. The idea that her child, their child, was somehow part of something bigger, something ancient, was almost too much to bear. "What kind of prophecy?" she asked, her voice trembling as she fought to keep the panic from rising. Callum sighed, stepping closer to her, his eyes filled with an intensity that made her heart race. "The prophecy says that the child born of my bloodline will either save or destroy my pack. It's a curse, Alara, one that was laid upon me by an alpha, someone who wants my death. And now they think that you're the key to either my freedom or my destruction." Her breath caught in her throat, her knees weakening as the weight of his words settled heavily on her chest. "So they want to kill us both." Her voice was barely above a whisper, the fear seeping through her like a cold fog. He nodded slowly, his face drawn tight with worry. "Yes, they'll stop at nothing to get to you, to get to the child. They think it's the only way to break the curse." For a moment, the rune felt like it was spinning. Alara gripped the edge of the table for support, her heart hammering in her chest as the truth of it all slammed into her like a tidal wave. Callum was cursed, hunted by his pack, and now she and the child she carried were caught in the middle of it. "What are we supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, the weight of her fear pressing down on her. "We run," he said, his voice low and fierce. "We leave this place. We go somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find us." But Alara began, but she was cut off by the sound of a soft tapping on the window, the kind of sound that seemed almost too quiet to be real. Her blood ran cold. Slowly, she turned toward the sound, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the shadow outside the window. A figure, tall and imposing, standing still in the darkness. She froze, her heart skipping a beat as the figure's eyes glinted in the dim light. They were glowing, faintly but unmistakably. Wolf's eyes, the unmistakable eyes of a member of the rogue pack. They had found her. "Callum!" Alara gasped, turning back to him, but he was already moving, his expression a mask of pure concentration. "They're here," he growled. "We have to leave now." But it was too late. The figure outside the window began to move, their silhouette shifting in the shadows as they stepped forward, closer to the glass. Alara's breath caught in her throat as she realized there was more than one. The pack was closing in, and there was nowhere to run. Chapter 8. The night had fallen thick, wrapping the city in an oppressive cloak of silence. Alara felt it, the weight of everything that had happened, the secrets, the lies, the fear, but most of all the pull. It had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface, but now it thrummed through her veins with an urgency she could no longer ignore. Callum led her through the dark streets, his pace swift and purposeful, his steps never faltering. His eyes, once so full of rage and desperation, now held a quiet intensity, as though he knew something she didn't, something that would change everything. The city around them seemed far away, as though they were stepping out of time itself, away from the chaos and into something ancient. They turned off the main roads, walking deeper into the outskirts, where the noise of the city faded into the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the entrance of a hidden temple, its stones worn smooth by centuries of time. The place felt alive in a way that unsettled Alara. A place untouched by civilization, shrouded in a deep, ancient magic that seemed to hum in the very air around them. The moon above them cast a pale light over the structure, making it glow with an eerie, almost ethereal radiance. "This is it," Callum said, his voice low, reverberating through the silence. His fingers brushed against the cool stone of the archway as though seeking some reassurance, some connection to the power that lay beyond. "This is where you'll find the answers you need." Elara hesitated for a moment, her heartbeat quickening. Why here? Why now? Callum's gaze met hers, his wolf eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Because this place, it holds the key to breaking the curse. It's the only place where the truth can be revealed." She didn't question him further, though doubt still gnawed at her. Her heart ached with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She had never imagined that she would find herself standing in the heart of something so ancient, so powerful. But everything about her life had been upended since the moment she met Callum. And now, in the shadow of this temple, she couldn't deny that the world she had known was slipping away, being replaced by something far more dangerous and far more alive. As they stepped into the temple, Elara felt it, an overwhelming surge of energy. The air grew thick, charged with the power of the place. The walls seemed to pulse with ancient magic, the symbols carved into the stone flickering as if alive. Her hand instinctively reached for the necklace around her neck, the symbol of the crescent moon etched into the pendant. To her shock, the necklace began to glow, the soft light growing brighter, warmer. It was as if it had been waiting for this moment, as if it had recognized the power of the temple, the pull of the moon, and her own place in it. "Elara!" Callum murmured, his voice reverberating in the stillness. "It's happening. The power within you, it's waking." She tried to steady herself, but her body hummed with an energy she had never known. It was like a fire burning in her veins, but it wasn't painful. No, it was alive in a way that made her feel more herself than ever before. A part of something greater, a part of this ancient magic. The symbols on the walls seemed to shift and dance in her vision, their meaning becoming clearer, more distinct. She saw images, strange creatures, impossible landscapes, and there in the center of it all was a child. Her child. Her heart skipped a beat. "It's calling to you." Callum's voice broke through her reverie, low and tense. "The power is awakening in you, Elara. You need to embrace it." Embrace it. How could she? How could she embrace something so ancient, so unknown? The uncertainty threatened to overwhelm her. But as she stood there, bathed in the soft glow of the temple, the pull of the moon seemed to cradle her, steady her. There was no turning back now. She was already a part of this world. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the power wash over her. It was then that she felt it, a rush of images flooding her mind. Visions of the past, of things long forgotten. She saw herself standing on the shores of a distant sea, the sky above her dark and full of stars. She felt the ground beneath her feet shift, the world changing, transforming. The child she carried, their child, was at the center of it all. A voice echoed in her mind, soft yet powerful, as though it came from the very heart of the temple. "The blood of the wolf, the heart of the moon, shall break the chains of fate." Her breath hitched. She opened her eyes, her heart racing in her chest. "What does it mean?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if speaking the words aloud would make them more real. Callum stepped closer, his gaze dark and intense, his voice low. "It means the child you carry, the one bound by blood to the moon. To me, it's the key. The curse can only be broken through the blood of the wolf and the heart of the moon. But the price is high. The sacrifice." He trailed off, the weight of the unspoken words heavy between them. She took a step back, her pulse quickening. "What sacrifice? What do you mean, Callum?" He clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing as he gazed at her, conflicted. "The curse can only be broken if one of us dies. If the prophecy is to be fulfilled, one of us must give up everything." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, heavy with the weight of their truth. Elara felt her knees weaken, her breath catching in her throat. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. "No, I don't understand. There has to be another way." Callum stepped forward, his expression pained, yet resolute. "There is no other way. We have to choose, Elara. The curse will consume both of us if we don't act. You must decide if you're willing to make that sacrifice." The tension in the air was suffocating. Elara felt as though the ground was slipping away beneath her feet. How could she make such a choice? How could she choose between Callum, the man she was falling for, and the child she was carrying, the child that was the future? As if on cue, a distant, low growl echoed from outside the temple. Elara's heart lurched. "They're here," Callum whispered. "The pack." Fear gripped her. She turned toward the entrance of the temple, her eyes wide with panic. Through the cracks in the ancient stone, she saw shadows moving, dark figures circling. The rogue pack had found them, but it wasn't just any pack member who stood among them. It was the Alpha. He was here, and with him, death. The shadow of the Alpha grew larger, the unmistakable presence of his power radiating outward. Elara could feel it in her bones, the undeniable pull of his threat. And as he stepped forward, the prophecy echoed in her mind again. The blood of the wolf, the heart of the moon. It was all leading to this moment, the final confrontation. Chapter 9. The air inside the temple thickened as the rogue pack closed in, their howls and growls echoing through the stone walls. A raw, unrelenting fear gripped Elara's chest, but she could feel the pulse of something deeper within her, the power of the moon, the blood of the wolf, and the child growing inside her. It was as though they were all connected, bound by an invisible thread that drew tighter with each passing moment. Callum's wolf form was already in motion. His massive body moved with fluid grace, muscles rippling beneath his thick fur as he lunged at the nearest rogue. His eyes burned with an intensity Elara had never seen before. His primal fury was a thing of beauty, of danger, of desperation. But even as Callum fought, Elara could sense the shift. The energy of the temple, ancient power, was being drained. Callum's strength was waning. The rogue wolves were many, and though Callum fought with all his might, they were overwhelming him, their numbers and raw aggression pushing him back. "No!" Elara whispered, her voice thick with fear, her chest tightening as she watched the battle unfold before her. She could see Callum struggling, his movements slower, his body slowing beneath the relentless assault of the rogues. His wolf form was magnificent, powerful, but the odds were against him. With every strike, Callum's form faltered, his energy drained, and the rogues smelled it. The alpha of the rogue pack, a towering beast with dark, piercing eyes and a cruel, twisted grin, stepped forward, watching the fight from the shadows. The alpha's voice echoed through the temple like a cold wind. "You are weak, Callum," the alpha taunted, his voice thick with malice. "You always were." Elara's blood ran cold as she watched Callum recoil. His golden eyes locked onto the alpha, but the fire there was dimming. Callum's body shook with exertion as he gritted his teeth, clearly struggling to maintain control. He was being pushed to the limit. The thought of losing him, of watching him fall to this pack, almost shattered her. He was everything she had ever needed, and now she was about to lose him. The alpha took another step forward, eyes gleaming with cruel amusement. "Your time is up. It's inevitable, Callum. Your fate was sealed long ago." The rogue alpha's eyes flicked to Elara, his gaze sharp, calculating. "And so is hers. The child she carries will be her doom." Something inside Elara snapped. The words echoed in her mind, her pulse pounding in her ears. The child she carried was a key, a weapon. But it was more than that, wasn't it? She could feel the truth coursing through her veins. And it wasn't just the power of the moon, the power of her bond with Callum. No, it was the child, their child, that held the key to everything. And Elara could feel that power, raw and untamed, thrumming beneath her skin, ready to explode. She couldn't just stand by anymore. She couldn't watch Callum fight alone. Not when she had the strength to help him. With every breath, she felt that power building inside her, as though the temple itself was calling to her, as though it recognized her, a part of its ancient magic. Her heart raced, her pulse quickening as the glow of the moon outside bathed the altar in a pale, silver light. "Callum!" she cried out, her voice raw with fear and determination. "I won't let you die. Not like this." Callum's eyes flicked to her, a spark of recognition flickering through his weakened gaze. "Elara," he gasped, his voice strained. "Get out of here. It's too dangerous." But it was too late. The power had already begun to stir within her. Elara's hand shot up, her fingers trembling, but the moment her palm faced the rogue's, something wild surged through her, a deep, primal force that shot from her fingertips like a bolt of lightning. The air around her crackled with raw energy. The moon's light seemed to intensify, pouring into her, filling her with strength and fury. A blast of power erupted from her hands, sending the nearest rogue wolves tumbling backward. They crashed into the walls, their bodies crumpling under the force of her power. Elara gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she felt the surge of energy coursing through her like fire and ice. She had never known anything like it. This was no ordinary magic, no ordinary power. It was ancient, wild, and it was hers. The rogue pack scattered, momentarily stunned by her attack, but the Alpha stood his ground, his eyes narrowing as he watched her, his sneer deepening. "You think you can stand against me?" the Alpha spat, his voice dripping with contempt. Elara's body shook with the weight of the power, but she felt Callum's presence beside her. He was still weak, still faltering, but she could feel his connection to her, his energy, his strength, flowing into her as though he were feeding her. "No," Elara said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I think you've underestimated me." The power within her surged again, but this time it wasn't just a burst of raw force. It was focused, controlled, channeled through the bond she shared with Callum. She could feel his heart, his every breath, his desperation. And in that moment she knew she wasn't alone. She could do this. Her hands clenched into fists, and the temple trembled beneath them. The air thickened, the power around them building to an unbearable pitch. She drew in a deep breath, and, with everything inside her, she focused that energy. A crackling barrier of light erupted from her body, enveloping the entire temple. The rogue wolves yelped as they tried to charge, but the energy held them back. They slammed into the invisible wall, their bodies rebounding like they had hit a solid surface. They growled in frustration, but the energy Elara had conjured was relentless. The Alpha snarled, his eyes glowing with fury. He wasn't going to let this go. He wouldn't be stopped. He rushed forward, but Elara pushed harder, focusing her power, tightening the barrier. She could feel the strain, but she couldn't stop now. She had to protect Callum. She had to protect their future. Finally, with a roar of frustration, the Alpha stepped back, his eyes flicking to the pack, then to Elara. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. "You think this child will save you? No, it will be the end of you all." He turned and, with one final, hateful glance, vanished into the night, leaving the pack members behind to fend for themselves. The temple fell silent, save for the heavy breaths of Elara and Callum. Elara's body trembled, her knees threatening to buckle beneath her, but she held herself upright. She could feel the weight of what she had just done. The power she had tapped into was beyond anything she could have imagined. And yet, she had barely begun to understand it. Callum staggered toward her, his wolf form flickering as he shifted back to his human shape. He looked at her with something she couldn't quite place. Admiration, awe, maybe fear. But there was a deep, undying gratitude in his gaze. "You did it," he whispered hoarsely, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." But Elara's mind was already racing. her thoughts clouded by the Alpha's words. The child, the prophecy, his warning. "Callum!" she breathed, her voice trembling. "What do we do now?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the weight of the prophecy, of everything that had happened, crashed down on them both. As Alara and Callum stood in the aftermath of the battle, the full weight of their situation settling in, Alara's thoughts were filled with the Alpha's final words. The child was the key, but was it a key to salvation or to destruction? Chapter 10. The jungle surrounding them was thick with the scent of earth, of moss and rich, damp air. The trees stretched high above, their canopies interwoven, blocking out much of the sun. But despite the cool shadows and the constant hum of insects, the world felt still, almost as though it held its breath, waiting. Callum and Alara moved silently through the underbrush, each step purposeful, each breath heavy with the weight of what had happened, of what was still to come. They didn't speak as they trekked deeper into the jungle. Words felt too fragile, too fleeting in a moment like this, one that was teetering on the edge of a precipice, the future uncertain and full of shadows. Finally, they arrived at their sanctuary. It was a quiet clearing, nestled between towering trees and lush foliage. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers, the green, soft earth beneath their feet. The silence here was different, calming, welcoming even. For the first time in days, Alara felt the tightness in her chest loosen, just a fraction. Here, in this secluded place, she could breathe. She could recover, but she could never forget. Callum's hand brushed against her back as they walked toward a small patch of soft moss, a natural bed tucked away beneath a canopy of vines. He was always close, his presence a constant anchor, even as a storm of thoughts raged within him. He could not hide his restlessness. She could feel it in the tense set of his shoulders, the furrow in his brow. "Are you sure this is where you want to be?" he asked softly, his voice rough from the fight, from the tension still gnawing at his insides. Alara glanced up at him, her heart heavy with the same unspoken fear that gripped him. "I need to rest, Callum," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We both do." He nodded, but the dark clouds in his eyes didn't lift. His gaze lingered on her, on the curve of her stomach, now more pronounced as the days passed. Their child was growing stronger, but so too was the sense of impending doom. There was no escaping the truth now. Sitting on the moss-covered ground, Alara rested her back against the trunk of a great tree, the weight of the world pressing on her chest, suffocating her with its relentless pull. Callum knelt beside her, his body still trembling from the battle they had just survived, his wounds, though healed, still fresh in his mind. The world around them felt eerily calm in contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. There was a strange stillness in the air, as though the jungle itself were holding its breath. The moonlight filtered down through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows across the ground. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Alara closed her eyes, feeling the cool air brush against her skin, her thoughts swirling like the leaves above them. She thought of the rogue pack, of the Alpha's final words, of the curse that haunted Callum, and of the prophecy that loomed over them like a dark cloud. She could feel it, deep inside her, an unease, a disquiet that refused to let go. No matter how hard she tried, it gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. Finally, Callum broke the silence. His voice was raw, strained, but there was a quiet finality to it. "I may never be free of the curse, Alara," he said, his eyes not meeting hers. "No matter what we do, no matter how much we fight, it's a part of me. It always will be." Alara's heart clenched in her chest. She had known this. She had seen the truth in the shadows of his eyes, in the lines etched into his face. The curse had a grip on him, tight and unyielding, and no matter how much they fought, no matter how hard they struggled, it would always be there, lurking in the background. But she refused to let that be the end of their story. She couldn't, not when they had come this far, not when they had so much to lose. "We don't have to fight it alone," she said, her voice firm despite the doubt that echoed in her chest. She placed her hand over his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the tremble of his pulse beneath her touch. We'll find a way. We always do. He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers, his gaze softening but still distant. I don't know if I can keep fighting. Every day it gets harder. The hunger inside me, His voice broke off, his chest heaving as if the very weight of his words was too much to bear. I'm scared, Alara. I'm terrified of what I'll become. Tears pricked the corners of Alara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, she moved closer, pressing herself against him, her breath shallow. She could feel the ache in his chest, the same one that had lodged itself in her own heart. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know how to fix this, how to break the curse that haunted him. But she knew this. She wouldn't let him fight alone. Not now. Not ever. I'm scared too, she whispered, her voice barely audible against the stillness of the jungle. But I'll be here. I'll always be here. For you. For our child. Callum closed his eyes, a ragged breath escaping his lips. He leaned his forehead against hers, the faintest tremor in his body. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of their breaths, the steady thrum of life that still pulsed between them. His lips brushed against her forehead in a tender kiss, and Alara's heart fluttered, caught in the ache of their shared grief, their shared love. I don't know what's coming, Alara, Callum murmured, his voice thick with emotion. But whatever it is, I'll face it with you. I will fight for you, for our child, even if it means sacrificing everything, even if it means losing myself. Alara's heart twisted in her chest, the weight of his words sinking deep into her soul. She had known the cost of this love from the very beginning, but hearing it from his lips, it made everything real. Too real. She could feel the bond between them growing stronger, deeper. But it wasn't just their love that bound them now. It was the child, the prophecy, the darkness that was closing in around them. I don't want to lose you, she whispered, her voice thick with the weight of her fears. I don't want to lose you, Callum. His hand tightened on hers, and for a fleeting moment the world outside faded. It was just them, alone in the jungle, together, clinging to each other amidst the storm. But even in this brief moment of peace, Alara could feel the pull of something darker, something deeper, stirring within her. And then, as if summoned by her thoughts, she felt it. A small shift, a stir within her beneath her ribs, a ripple, soft but unmistakable. Her breath caught in her throat, and she pulled back, her eyes widening in surprise. Callum noticed immediately, his gaze sharp and intense as he looked down at her. Alara. His voice was low, full of concern. What is it? I felt it, she whispered, her voice trembling. The baby. It moved. Callum's eyes softened as he placed a hand gently over her stomach, feeling the faint pulse of life that stirred within her. His expression changed, tenderness mixed with awe with something more. But Alara's heart raced, and the fear that had been bubbling beneath the surface surged again. Something was happening, something beyond their control. The baby wasn't just moving. It was calling to them, to her. And then, as if in response to her thoughts, a vision flashed before her eyes. A dark future, a world torn apart by the very child she carried. She saw destruction, fire, blood, a sea of darkness spreading across the land. A new beginning, but one that came at a terrible cost. She could feel it in her bones. The prophecy was coming closer to fulfillment. And the truth was far more complicated than she had ever realized. The real enemy wasn't just the rogue pack, wasn't just the curse. It was something much older, much more powerful. Alara gasped, clutching her chest as the vision faded, leaving her breathless, disoriented. Callum's voice broke through her haze. Alara, what's wrong? What did you see? She couldn't answer. Not yet. But she knew, deep down, that they were only at the beginning of something much darker. The prophecy was unfolding, and there was no escaping what was to come. As Alara stared into the distance, her heart heavy with the weight of the vision, she felt the child stir again, a powerful reminder that the future was coming for them all. But would they be ready for it? Chapter 11. The valley stretched before them, hidden deep within the jungle, a place untouched by time, untouched by the chaos that had ravaged the world outside. It was a sanctuary, a place of power, one that pulsed with the raw, untamed energy of the earth. The air here was thick with magic, alive with an energy that hummed beneath the surface. Alara could feel it in the very marrow of her bones, a call to something ancient, something primal. She stood at the edge of the valley, the weight of everything pressing down on her. The jungle had grown eerily quiet, as though it too sensed the storm that was coming. The rogue pack would not wait much longer. Their attack was inevitable, and yet, in the stillness of this mystical place, Alara felt something stir within her, a power she had never known she possessed. Callum stood beside her, his presence a steadying force, even as the turmoil inside him grew. His eyes were dark, distant, haunted by the curse that still clung to him. Even now, as they prepared for the final confrontation, he could not escape the pull of that darkness. The beast inside him was always there, lurking, waiting for the moment when he would no longer be able to control it. "We're ready!" Callum's voice was low, but there was a sharp edge to it, a quiet urgency that made Alara's heart race. She turned to look at him, meeting his gaze, and for a moment time seemed to slow. She could feel the weight of their connection, the bond that had grown between them, deeper and stronger than anything they had ever known. They were more than just lovers now. They were tied together in a way that defied words, bound by something far beyond the physical. But that connection, that raw, untamed force that had brought them together, now felt like a double-edged sword. The fate of everything they loved hung in the balance. And Alara, her powers, her strength, her growing connection to the supernatural world, was the key. But she was unsure, torn between the power within her and the fear of losing control. She could feel the child inside her, its presence growing stronger with each passing moment. The baby was more than just a part of her now. It was a force in its own right, a power tied directly to the magic of the moon, to the prophecy that had set everything in motion. She could feel its power, its potential, but she also felt the weight of the responsibility that came with it. "Alara!" Callum said softly, his hand brushing against hers. "You don't have to do this alone. You never have to face this on your own." Her heart clenched at his words. She had never been alone, not truly, not with him by her side. But the fear, the doubt, still lingered. She had seen the vision of the dark future. She had felt the weight of the prophecy pressing down on her. And now, with the rogue pack closing in, the decision she had to make was all too real. Could she control the power that was building inside her? Could she trust herself to use it without destroying everything in the process? "I don't know if I can control it, Callum," she whispered, her voice thick with uncertainty. "I don't know if I can." "Sure." He placed a finger to her lips, silencing her fears. "You can. You have to. We don't have a choice anymore, Alara. This is our moment. We fight for each other, for our child. And we fight to end this curse once and for all." His words were simple, but there was an undeniable strength in them, an unwavering conviction that stirred something deep inside her. He believed in her. He always had. And she realized in that moment that maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all she needed to believe in herself. The ground beneath them seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. Alara closed her eyes, letting the sensation wash over her. The jungle around them shifted, as if acknowledging their readiness, their acceptance of the path they had chosen. She inhaled deeply, drawing the magic of the land into her lungs, letting it fill her, nourish her. The power of the moon was within her, at the core of everything she was. It was a gift, yes, but it was also a burden, a responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders. And yet, for the first time, Elara felt a sense of calm, a certainty that this was where she was meant to be. This was where they were meant to fight. "We're ready," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but strong with the resolve that had been building within her. "We're ready." Callum squeezed her hand, his gaze never leaving hers. "Then let's finish this. Together." The air around them crackled with the raw energy of the moon, the magic swirling between them, weaving their fates together in a bond that could not be broken. As Elara raised her hands, her fingers tingled with the power she had long feared. The light of the moon, full and bright above them, seemed to answer her call, its silver glow cascading down into the valley. And then they heard it, the distant howl of wolves. The rogue pack was coming. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Elara and Callum stepped forward, their hearts beating as one. They were not just facing the rogue pack anymore. They were facing their own fears, their own doubts. But they would not back down. They could not. Elara's powers surged to the surface, a wild force that she could no longer contain. She could feel it, her connection to the supernatural world, to the moon, to the child within her. It was all coming together, building into something greater, something more than she had ever dreamed. But as the rogue pack grew nearer, something dark and powerful stirred within her. It was the same darkness she had felt in the vision, the same presence that had haunted her dreams. She was no longer just Elara. She was the vessel for something far more dangerous, far more powerful. And she was unsure of what that would mean for the battle ahead. The first wave of the rogue pack appeared from the trees, their eyes glowing with feral hunger, their bodies sleek with the power of their wolf forms. The air was thick with the scent of blood and danger, and Elara's heart raced. They were here. The final battle had begun. Callum moved beside her, his body tense, his eyes dark with the struggle inside him. He was holding back the beast, keeping it at bay for now. But she could see it in the way his muscles tensed, in the way his breath quickened. The beast wanted out, and Callum was fighting it every step of the way. "Ready." Callum's voice was low, a growl beneath the surface. Elara nodded, her hands shaking as the energy inside her built, ready to explode. "Let's do this." Together, they stepped forward. The battle had begun. The rogue pack charged, their wolves howling in unison as they rushed toward them, but Elara didn't hesitate. She raised her arms high, calling upon the power of the moon, the earth, the child within her. The magic surged, wild and untamed, flowing through her like fire. She could feel Callum beside her, his strength anchoring her, his power merging with hers in a way that was both terrifying and beautiful. The light of the moon exploded from them in a blinding burst, a wave of energy so powerful that it knocked the rogue pack back, sending them crashing to the ground. The jungle itself seemed to roar in response, the trees shaking, the earth trembling. And then, in a moment of perfect unity, Elara and Callum combined their strength, unleashing the full force of the moon's power. A blast of energy shot out from them, a wave of magic that swept across the valley, destroying everything in its path. The rogue pack was obliterated, their wolves torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. But in the chaos, Elara felt something shift, something darker, something more powerful. The alpha of the rogue pack had survived. He stood at the edge of the valley, his eyes glowing with rage and power. He was more than just a wolf now. He was something else, something far darker. He sneered, his voice cold and filled with venom. "You may have won this round, Elara, but the battle is far from over. I will return, and when I do, I will be more powerful than you could ever imagine." With that, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving nothing behind but the echo of his threat. The rogue alpha had escaped, his promise to return hanging in the air like a dark cloud. The final battle was far from over, and Elara knew that the true test was yet to come. Chapter 12. The storm had passed, its fury spent, but the air still crackled with the remnants of its power. The jungle, which had once been a place of darkness and danger, now lay still, as though it too had caught its breath. The clouds that had blackened the sky had cleared, leaving behind the soft, golden glow of the sun. It bathed the land in a warm, healing light, but there was an underlying tension in the air, an unease that lingered like a shadow just out of reach. Elara stood at the edge of a serene glade, her gaze sweeping over the familiar, yet foreign landscape. The world felt different now, as though it had shifted on its axis. The rogue pack was no more, but the price of their victory weighed heavily on her heart. Her powers, which had once terrified her, now surged through her veins like a wild river, untamed and uncontrollable. She had become something more, and yet, in her heart, she still wondered what that truly meant. Beside her, Callum was silent. His presence was a constant, a steadying force in the storm. But even now, in the quiet aftermath, she could sense the tension in him. The curse that had plagued him for so long had been broken, the chains that had bound him shattered. But the relief was bittersweet, for the battle had left its scars. Both of them were changed, shaped by the power they had wielded, the magic that had surged within them. "Do you feel it?" Elara asked softly, her voice almost a whisper as she turned to him. Callum's eyes met hers, dark and deep, haunted with the weight of their journey. The beast that had once lurked within him, threatening to consume everything in its path, was no longer there. He was free, but there was a hollowness in his gaze, a lingering sadness that spoke of the cost of that freedom. "I feel everything," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "The curse is gone, Elara. But it's more than that. I feel whole. For the first time in my life, I feel like myself." She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling as they intertwined with his. The bond between them, stronger than ever, pulsed with the energy of the moon, a reminder of the power they had called upon to defeat the rogue pack. Their connection had always been fierce, but now it was a thing of legend, a force that no one could ever break. "I don't know what's next," Elara confessed, her voice trembling. "The magic, it's still inside me. I can feel it, but I don't know how to control it anymore." Callum gave a small, bittersweet smile, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "We'll figure it out. Together. We always have." Her heart ached at the tenderness in his voice. How much they had been through, how far they had come. They had faced the darkness together, fought against forces beyond their understanding, and come out on the other side. But the victory had come at a price. Elara's powers were no longer something she could hide, something she could push aside. They had become a part of her, woven into the very fabric of her being. The baby growing inside her was a constant reminder of that, a symbol of the new life they had created, the hope they had fought for. But with that hope came uncertainty. What would she become? What would they become? She glanced down at her swollen belly, her fingers gently resting on the curve of it. The child within her moved, a soft, reassuring flutter that made her heart skip a beat. This child was their future, their legacy. But it was also a wild thing, a force of nature that would shape the world in ways they could never fully understand. The glade around them seemed to respond to her thoughts, the trees swaying gently in the breeze, their leaves rustling as though in sympathy. The air was thick with magic, the earth itself alive with the energy that had been unleashed during the battle. Everything felt connected, everything felt alive. Elara closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to ground herself in the serenity of the moment. But her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Her heart ached with love for Callum, for the life they had fought for the child growing within her. But there was still fear of what she had become, of what she was capable of. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. "For everything that's to come?" Callum's gaze softened as he took a step closer, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "We don't have a choice, Elara. We've already made it this far. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Always." The words were simple, but they held the weight of everything they had endured. Together, they had faced the darkness. Together, they had fought. and together they would continue no matter the cost. But even as they shared this tender moment, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that the peace they had fought for would never truly be theirs. The rogue Alpha had promised to return, and something in the pit of her stomach told her that the worst was yet to come. Days passed in a blur of recovery, healing, and quiet reflection. Alara's powers had settled, but they still lurked beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the magic that flowed through her veins. The child within her grew stronger with each passing day, a beacon of hope and a reminder of the future they had yet to build. But Alara knew that the battle was far from over. There were still shadows lurking, waiting for their moment to strike. And she was no longer sure she could protect everyone she loved. It wasn't long before the time came, the time to bring their child into the world. The labor was long, the pain intense, but it was nothing compared to the strength Alara felt within herself. She had faced worse, had fought harder battles than this, and as the moments passed, as the world shifted around her, she knew that this was the most important fight of all. With a final, triumphant cry, the child was born, a small, perfect bundle of life. Alara held their baby in her arms, tears streaming down her face as she gazed down at the tiny, wriggling form. She could feel the power within the child, the same power that had bound her and Callum together. This was their future. This was their hope. And yet, even in this moment of joy, the shadows lingered. Callum knelt beside her, his hand gently brushing her hair as he looked down at their child, his eyes filled with awe and love. "We did it, Alara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We created something beautiful." But Alara could feel it, feel the weight of what was to come. The Alpha had promised to return. The world was not done with them yet. As the days passed and their child grew, Alara and Callum remained vigilant. The peace they had fought for was fragile, a fleeting moment in a world filled with dangers they had yet to understand. And as they walked away from the glade, the soft sounds of the jungle surrounding them, they knew that their journey was far from over. A new danger loomed on the horizon. Someone more powerful than the rogue Alpha awaited them. Someone who would test everything they had fought for. And so, as they left the glade, their hearts filled with both hope and fear. They knew that the story was far from finished. The shadows of the past were behind them, but a new, more powerful threat awaited. Their love had triumphed, but the war was far from over. What lay ahead would test them in ways they could never imagine.